Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on conceal carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And we got a lot of good stuff for you today. Well, we got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we got fun stuff to talk about.
Yeah. There's always interesting stuff to talk about. But, first of all, I want to address the latest shooting, the school shooting that happened this last week. Unfortunate, right? I mean, not just unfortunate. I mean, downright evil. 15-year-old kid walks into school, starts shooting. We know 4 dead, I believe, as of the last that I heard. I believe there was maybe another 7 or 8 injured. 15-year-old kid apparently was showing signs of being disturbed. The school had been called on multiple occasions. The parents have been called on multiple occasions. Supposedly, and I say supposedly because I don't trust anything that's coming out of the media's mouth, especially when it comes to guns. And for that matter, I don't trust anything coming out of the government's mouth either when it comes to guns. I don't trust either one of them. So the reigning story is dad buys a handgun last week with the intent of giving it to his son, the 15-year-old. He keeps it stored in an unlocked nightstand is what I'm hearing. And then the gun is missing. And, dad goes, looks for a gun when he hears there's a shooting at the school, sees the gun's missing, calls the police, says, hey, I think it might be my son. My gun is missing. And now, of course, the parents have been indicted on a $500,000 bail each, and they're being charged with involuntary manslaughter. So a lot of things going on here. I mean, a lot of moving parts here. First of all, I bought a gun for my son, so to speak. He doesn't have possession of it. It is totally locked up. It's a .22 rifle. And the only time he's ever shot it is when he has been with me. Yeah. And I was teaching him how to shoot it.
Yep.
So I don't have a problem with this idea because I wouldn't have bought a .22 for myself. I mean, if I would have bought probably the Ruger 1022, right? I would have bought something a little bit more fun than a bolt action. I didn't want my son getting in the habit of, I can just pull the trigger and bullets come out. I wanted him to learn, to aim and take the time and all that stuff. So that was why I bought a bolt action, which, by the way, a great little gun for a bug out situation because you got to hunt small game, man. I'm telling you, 22 is the way to go right there.
22 is handy. You can do a lot with it. Pretty solidly accurate up to 100 yards. And obviously small caliber, but you can carry a lot of it. And, and take out, guys, there are guys that kill coyotes with them. It's not,
there's been unfortunate situations where people have died because they were shot with a .22. I mean, it's a gun. It's a gun. It'll do the job on a lot of things. And of course, we would say, in a battle scenario or self-defense scenario, it wouldn't be our first pick. Oh, no.
But it will kill. And
actually,
something people don't realize, while the round loses, it doesn't shoot as straight after about 150 yards or so, maybe really after 100. But my understanding is the test for lethality is, will it penetrate a half-inch board? And I've seen tests. Iraq Veteran 8888 did a test where they were shooting a board and they got to like 300 plus yards on it. And at that point, it was going all over the place, so they couldn't hit the board anymore, but it was penetrating at that level. And so that tells you, even at a distance, man, it'll kill. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So, I'm torn on the whole indicting of parents.
Yeah.
And, you got all of the armchair quarterbacks who are, these were trash parents because, look at everything. Look, first of all, again, I don't know who I can believe in these scenarios. You certainly can't believe the media, and I certainly can't believe the government that is trying to prosecute people, because we saw what they said about Kyle Rittenhouse, and there was video evidence showing that the dude was totally innocent, completely innocent. So I'm torn. Do parents play a role? Parents always play a role in their kids' lives. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And, the media is, they were gun lovers. Well, shoot, crap, dude. I hope nothing happens then with my family because I'm a gun lover, right?
Yeah.
But I also believe in safety, and I'm also not going to turn guns over to my kids. I mean, first of all, they're way too young. Yeah. 6 and 10, but, I'm torn. That's all I'm saying is I'm really, really torn because I don't trust the government one iota when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
And involuntary manslaughter. I mean, really, is that what we're going to start doing now? We're going to start going after the parents.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all these things that are unknown. And I will just acknowledge, I don't know enough to make a judgment here. Now, if they knew that their son was planning to harm people and then they left the gun, that still doesn't make them guilty. It makes them irresponsible. But yeah, I'm really, I don't have enough information here, but right now I just don't understand why the parents are being charged. I mean, I guess if he had told them that he was going to go and do this thing and they didn't take it seriously, didn't tell anybody, okay, we'd have something but there's all these things where I'm like, I don't get why they're putting this on the parents right now.
Yeah. It's tough to say. I mean, supposedly he had written stuff in his notebook, but I don't know if this has come out after the fact or if it was known before. I do believe the school had been called earlier in the month and the parents had been called. He had been caught looking for ammo on his cell phone by one of the teachers. And so the school called the parents. And the mom apparently texted the son, LOL, I'm not mad at you. You just have to learn not to get caught. And of course, now that all this has happened, that does not look good for her.
Yeah. But all of us can understand that in context. Now it looks bad retrospectively, but if my kids were looking for ammo, I would be like, you're getting me a Christmas present.
or it's like, okay, you want to know the difference between, this hollow point, that hollow point, this other company's hollow point, which one, Well,
because apparently hollow point or not matters when you're being prosecuted in a self-defense situation in Wisconsin. So maybe minors should learn about those kinds of things.
I love how the prosecutor, by the way, we're talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse case. The prosecutor was like, but hollow points explode. And the judge has to stop it. And he goes, I don't think you mean explode. You mean expand, right? Because there are bullets that explode. These aren't those. And it's like, I don't even know if the prosecutor knew. I mean, obviously he was trying to inflame the jury, but I don't know that he knew the difference.
I don't think he did. Yeah. Which, think about, ignorance in prosecution can get people hurt. That's a whole other conversation. Ignorance will get a lot of people in trouble. And I mean, ignorance on the part of police and prosecutors, where they might not understand the evidence. Of course, that dude's just being egregious anyway. So,
right.
Oh man. So the shooting, I guess there was a football player that charged the guy, lost his life protecting people supposedly. And
according to the memes.
Good for him. According to the memes. Yeah, it's all according to memes. But memes are as reliable as anything else, maybe more.
Maybe more. Sure.
Oh, yeah, this is, I am concerned at the precedent it sets with them charging the parents. I just don't know. It's and there's a biblical principle of, when we first hear of something, it sounds one way until the evidence all comes out. And so there's a biblical principle for waiting to get the information before we make a judgment. And we are in a world where the media wants you to make a judgment before you get the information. And that is the name of the game for them. And so it's right for us to hold off, wait and figure out what's going on. Here's some more information that might not even come out until trial. But just on principle, my first gut reaction is like, hey, wait a minute. This doesn't seem right. Let's wait and hear what's going on. Because this kid did what he did. It probably had some parental issues. There were probably some problems at home. But yeah.
I guess the reason why the judge set the bail at $500,000 a piece is because they had told their attorney, we'll surrender ourselves. And then the attorney couldn't get a hold of them. They were dodging the attorney's calls. And so then they went after them to go arrest them. Mm-hmm. And so the judge was like, it looks like you're running. I'm slapping $500,000 bail on each of you.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know the bail, how it works, you either got to come out with $500,000 cash or you get bailed out by a bail bondsman, which means you got to put up 10% that you never get back, right? That's the premium. That's what you pay. So, who's got $100,000 laying around that isn't even going to go to their defense? It's going to get them out of jail while they mount a defense.
Yeah. So you're in that kind of situation. Even if you did have the money, you're probably more likely to be like, I need this for lawyers. I'm going to stay in the clink.
Yeah. And by the way, lawyers are just going to suck up all your money. And I mean, you're pretty much screwed unless you are a millionaire. I mean, literally cash millionaire, and can dump that money. You're not going to get a real defense. You're just going to get what you get. And it's not going to be great.
Yeah.
Justice in this country is shot. There's no doubt.
It has been for a while.
Yeah.
Man.
It's unfortunate.
It reminds me of how many times I've had a conversation with a lawyer when, and I haven't gotten in, I'm by God's grace, I've not been in any serious legal trouble ever, really any legal trouble ever by God's grace. But I remember I've been in situations where I had to be deposed because I witnessed an accident. And I remember a lawyer friend of mine was like, listen, you need to understand this. It is not about the truth. It is not about what's right and wrong. It is about the law. And you have to understand that like they are going to make a case out of nothing. So he's like, you have to protect yourself. You were an innocent bystander watching something, but like they'll try to make a mess for you. And so he's like, just remember, it's not about the truth. It's not about what's right. It's about the law. And the fact that he's not the only lawyer I've heard say that.
Yeah.
Kind of gets me in my stomach. And this is a good dude-ish. I mean, but they're all acknowledging, and so think about like a whole field that's supposed to be about righteousness and truth, and all of them acknowledge that it's just not about that. And that should just concern us. Yeah,
it's like I've said before in this podcast, a good friend of mine went to jail for a couple of years, and he took a guilty plea. And if he hadn't taken the guilty plea, he'd be looking at from like 14 to 16 years. And so instead he gets 4 years, but it's like 22 months. And then the rest of it's probation and all that jazz. But I knew I had firsthand knowledge of what they were accusing him of because I worked at the company that he was at. And I literally read everything that they said in the court documents. And I knew they were lying. I literally knew they were lying, but they have prosecutorial immunity. I knew the guy was innocent 100%. And he also knew the odds. And he was so thankful, by the way, that he took the plea deal because in jail, he met a bunch of people, doctors, senators, congressmen, because it was white collar, right? So he was in club fed, as we joke.
Yeah.
And they didn't take the plea. And so they're facing these huge long terms. And he's like, the best move I ever did was take the plea deal. Because there's no way I would have won. I mean, first of all, government has unlimited funds. He'd been in the system, waiting on trial for 4 or 5 years. And they keep extending it to bleed out all of your money till you're left with a public defender, which is what happened to him. Because you got no more cash. You can't pay a real attorney. You get the public defender. And public defenders don't give a rip. Like, I remember they called me because I had firsthand knowledge. They're trying to mount their defense. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, they're saying this to me. Oh, what do you mean there was they were actually helping people? There was like 130 salespeople and 40 people who were actually doing the work. And I go, there was not 130 salespeople at the same time. They fired a lot of people because they couldn't actually sell. I go, there was only 20 to 30 salespeople at a time. I mean, but this is his attorney. And I'm like, do you not even like, did you not look at the dates of people's employments when they started, when they got fired? You're just assuming, oh, it was basically a boiler room and people were just selling crap and no one was actually doing any work. I'm like, that was so not true. The government claimed only, 4 or 5 clients had ever gotten help. And then someone for the prosecution was over at the office, and the guys who were indicted, they were there too, because they're all out on bail. I guess there's no bail in the federal system. You either stay in the pokey or they let you out. It's like one or the other. And they're like, the completed files. Oh, those are all those files over there, and there's hundreds of them. But what do they claim to the court? Well, they only did 4 or 5, not the hundreds that you have documented proof that they actually did. I mean,
they just lie.
I can't trust the government. Then we saw, the Bundy case, right, with the Bureau of Land Management, where it took all of the patriots standing up to them for them to with guns. They showed up with guns and said, "You're not taking this dude's cattle. You're not doing it." And that was found to be so corrupt that the judge just was like, I can't believe how corrupt this prosecution was.
Well, and there's another example. If you remember when there wasn't enough news about it anyway, but the news that was there was trying to paint him as a racist, to try to paint him as this awful, terrible person who had no case, no standing. And in many cases, they were twisting the facts of it to where even a reasonable person would hear it and be like, oh, I guess he doesn't have a case, until you actually looked at what was actually happening.
Right.
And think about all that. They did everything they could to defame the guy and make this look like a terrible, terrible thing. And then after the fact, he won the case. And of course, no mention of it. Right. People have probably already solidified in their mind what they think happened with that.
Well, what's funny is I got a pastor friend, quote unquote friend, Facebook friend, because of all the stuff I do with pastors in Idaho. And I guess that's where the guy is now. And he's like, that guy's crazy, man. He's always protesting something, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he sounds like a hero to me. What do you mean? He's protesting stuff. I think he's Mormon too, but still he's protesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you heard, Doug Wilson has made comments on the Rittenhouse case, and essentially saying like, hey, they mistreated this kid, whatever. And he had for a while said, well, it was unwise for this kid to be out there, blah, blah, blah. But Doug Wilson, pastor, has kind of come around and said, I'm not sure it was the worst thing that he was out there. He's like, yeah, I mean, no matter how you cut it was self-defense. He shot in self-defense, and he was right to do that. But he's like, when rioters are burning cities, and this kid went out there to help protect a small business, and I'm like, when the cops are completely failing, maybe this is what needs to happen. And he was very gentle, but he's like, I don't even know if this was unwise. In fact, maybe we should follow this kid's example. And I'm like, yeah. And so it's similar to what we see with the Bundy Ranch case. Man, it worked. And so when people are like, well, we could never stand up to the government, we could never blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, you realize, guys,
you're going to need F-15s and fully automatic rifles. No, actually.
No, you don't. This is why I keep telling people man, and you don't even have to worry.
And by the way, the only guy who went to jail was the guy who took the plea deal. He was one of the snipers, and he took a plea deal and he went to jail. The rest of them were let off because it was seen as what they did was not wrong. Yeah. And there was so much corruption. Well,
I just remind everybody, don't even think about the government and whatever as much. I mean, yeah, that could be an issue, but just think about I'm sitting here now and I'm like, if things went down, I would call my neighbors and they would be there for me and I would be there for them. Or I have the people in my church that being ready, it's the old Minuteman concept. I'm going to defend my family, my friends, the people in my church. And that's the mentality we need to have. And you can do it. Whether it's rioters, whether it's something else, you can be there and you can help out your friend to keep the worst from happening. So anyway, so related to this, Have you heard of the comedian Ron? I don't know how to say his last name. Funks, I think, or Funches, or I don't even know how to say his last name. It's a comedian. He was a voice actor in a couple of the Trolls movies, but I watched a little clip of his stand-up. And he's like, hey, you know what? He's like, I get along with anybody. He's like, except like, racists and whatever. And he's like, and people who don't believe in any conspiracy theories. And everybody's like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's like, I understand if you don't believe all the conspiracy theories, but he's like, I got a problem with you if you don't believe any of them. He's like, you're just assuming that the government is, batting 1,000, telling us the truth all the time. He's like, I can't hang out with people like that. He's like, I need to know that you believe in at least some conspiracy theories. Otherwise, you're the least trustworthy person I could ever be around.
Wow. That's funny.
It was hilarious, man. And he's a good, like his whole tone of voice and everything. He's a good comedian. He does it well. Anyway, I thought that was good. So yeah, waiting to see what happens with this case with the parents of the shooter. I'm not rushing to a judgment, but I'm questioning what our government's doing here.
Yeah.
And a side note, it's conveniently timed, as is always the case for shootings, for the government. So we have big stuff going on related to the New York gun case, related to pro-life case that's going on. We have and
of course there are now renewed calls for stacking the courts.
Of course,
raising it from 9 to 12, 13, whatever.
And we have the Ghislaine Maxwell case going on right now, getting zero media attention. But have you followed? Like, we don't. What did we say? Correlation is not causation, but it's worth paying attention to the fact that a whole bunch of major CEOs are getting dropped, like as the trial is starting. CEOs are resigning or getting bumped. And with very little information, right? And so intrigued by this. And man, the pictures that are coming out are just, we already know, some of them were the ones we'd already seen. Like if you watch the documentary Dirty Money or whatever it is on Netflix, like you've seen some of these, but they're legit. Nobody's questioning the fact that Prince Andrew, spent time hanging out with him. We've got flight logs where Bill Gates didn't even start hanging out with that clown until after he was convicted of, child rape. And so I'm like, there's a whole lot more information coming out. And stuff like this that distracts the media is perfectly timed. So, and it doesn't mean that they're causing the shooting itself, but it does have a lot to do with what's getting attention. And I think that's just worth acknowledging. And so don't let them control it. Go and follow as much as you can of the cases, especially the Ghislaine Maxwell case right now, man. I'm telling my Christian friends, I'm like, pray for the pro-life case, pray for the gun case, and then be watching, because there's big stuff's going to come out, I think, with this Ghislaine Maxwell case, or big stuff's not going to come out. It's still going to be there. Interesting things happening. So
it's really interesting. One of the things that you and I have talked about before, and one of the big problems that I see in our current system is the Supreme Court comes out and says something, the Heller case, whatever. And then the lower courts are supposed to then use that as their guide when judging, if you will, these other cases that are brought to them. And they just ignore it. They just ignore it because it doesn't fit. Like in the Ninth Circuit is known as being a liberal court. And so a great example of this is the magazine ban. So, I don't remember what year it was. 2019, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, California voted on a proposition that basically said, I believe it was a proposition. I don't think the government came up with it. I think they got the voters to vote on it and said you can't have more than a 10-round magazine in California. And it used to be that you couldn't buy them in California, but you could still own them if you had them before. And you could still use them. They had to be the pre-ban magazines.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they took that to court, went to a federal judge. The federal judge came back and said, yeah, that's unconstitutional. Based on what the Supreme Court has already said, no, you can't ban magazines because it's got more than 10 rounds. whatever is commonly used in the United States. And the state was saying, well, they're not common in California. Well, they're not common in California because you banned them. So you can't use your own ban as an example of what's common or not. We got to look at the nation. These are very common. We call them standard capacity magazines because we don't let the media call them large capacity magazines. It's just standard. For an AR standard, it's 30 rounds. Yep. For a Glock 19, it's 15. I think, right? It's 15 plus 1 in the chamber, or is it 14 plus 1 in the chamber? I can't remember.
You're the Glock guy.
I know the number one gun I use, right? But Glock 17, I believe, is 17 rounds. And that's just standard, right? Every cop who's running a Glock has a standard capacity magazine. So notice they're not saying we think they're bad as a whole. They're saying we don't want you to have them. We're going to have them. We're going to use them. Here in California, it is quite known that basically anyone in law enforcement can get any gun they want. Where it's illegal for us to get it from a dealer, we have to buy it from a private party, which means it's what we call the California tax. My Glock 43 cost me, and I got a steal on it, by the way, cost me $825, brand new, never used. A gun that would cost $450 in any other state. But it's the California tax because someone who has a badge somewhere was able to buy the gun and then they turn around and sell it on the private market, which is a gray area. It's technically illegal for them to do, but literally who's going to bust a cop? Another cop for selling a gun? They're never going to do that. That's why they get away with it. They can do whatever they want. The only cops that ever get busted for doing that are cops that are selling, like we had one guy in LA who had sold like 700 guns that way over the last 2 years. Those are the guys they go after. The guy that's doing, 1 or 2 a year, they don't even care. They just don't give a rip. So anyway, bottom line is this. The judge said, no, this is unconstitutional. You cannot ban these magazines in California. And he did that right before he released his decision, right before, I think it was like Cesar Chavez Day, which was, we take like a day off. The courts are all closed for Cesar Chavez Day. And so they couldn't get in to ask for a stay of his order. And so there was a giant whooshing sound over all of the United States as every standard capacity magazine was flooding into the state. I don't know how many I bought. I have friends who literally drove to Nevada and just went down the aisles with their arms on the shelves and just poured everything into their basket. I remember one of my buddies goes, I bought a 15 round mag for this gun. He goes, I don't even own this gun. He's like, I bought the magazine, right?
Good for him.
And so then the state, appealed it, or not appealed it. They asked the judge to stay his order. The judge waits Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They go to the Ninth Circuit because all these magazines are flooding in and he hasn't responded to their request for his stay. So then he goes, okay, since they went to the Ninth Circuit, knowing full well it's going to get stayed by them. Okay, I'll stay the order. But since people have bought in good faith, because I said it was unconstitutional, we're going to grandfather all of these magazines through 5:00 tomorrow on Friday. And so it was just like, now the state's all pissed because, 1 million magazines, whatever, hit California. And how are they going to know? Like we had a case in Ventura, I think it was Ventura, where a guy was on parole. He had a roommate. I don't know if it was his brother or relative or just a friend. And his parole officer came over to the house. The brother was gone. And the parole officer searches the house, finds the brother's gun, who was legal to own a gun. It was locked in his room and it had a standard capacity magazine. So they arrested him. And he goes, well, I bought this during Freedom Week from a private party. And they eventually had to drop the case because they couldn't prove that he didn't buy it during Freedom Week from a private party. And that's where he claims he bought it. So I'm assuming he's telling the truth because, you're innocent until proven guilty, not the other way around.
Exactly. I wonder if a better move would be like, well, wait a minute. Are you sure that I didn't buy this during Freedom Week? Did you? really don't have to say, but like you have to prove that I didn't, right?
And they didn't want, even
right
after
on.
they read the case, they didn't want to, because they're like, they assumed he was lying. And I must admit, I assume he's lying too, but I also don't give a rip. I mean,
we really don't know though. I mean, in seriousness, we don't know. And honestly,
no idea.
If you were going to ask me which of my magazines I bought in whatever time, I couldn't tell you. Like,
I could tell you every single one of mine. I bought one in one specific week, and every magazine that I modified, it was legal to modify in that week. That was the week I did it.
Good for you, Pete.
I've never done it any other time.
The rest of us buy magazines in the free world like we'd buy socks. Like,
I know, like when you go to,
I couldn't tell you when I got these socks. Yeah.
What is it? Palmetto or something like that. They're like, oh, we got a deal this week. You buy all these ammo, we're going to give you all these magazines with it. And I'm like, oh, that's the free world right there. When do I get to join the rest of civilization? I mean, yeah.
Hopefully soon, Pete.
That is the goal. That is the goal.
Yeah.
So anyway, federal judge said it was unconstitutional. We had the Freedom Week. They stated it went to the Ninth Circuit. And when you go there, you sit before 3 judges, and a 2-1, they said, no, the federal judge was correct. Then they asked for, we want the big panel. I don't remember what it is, like 15 judges. Most of them, or maybe it was 11 judges. I don't remember what it is, right? I'm not a lawyer. Most of them were liberal appointees, and it was very hostile in the oral arguments. And so everyone just assumed, all right, this thing is going away. It did. Decision came out this last week. They said, no, it's totally constitutional for you to take away someone's constitutionally protected rights. And so now they got to appeal it to the Supreme Court. The question is, will the Supreme Court hear it? Because they got a history of not listening to gun cases. But to me, this is a big one. This affects California, New York, New Jersey, Hawaii. It affects the big liberal states that are totally screwing over their citizens and taking away their rights to defend themselves the way that they see fit. Yeah. And I still remember reading the judge's order when he said, no, this is unconstitutional for you to take away someone's rights like this. And he lists examples of people who had to fire more than 20 shots in order to stop the threat. He's like, how are you going to say 10's enough? When's enough? What if 3's enough? Are you going to make magazines only hold 3 rounds? I mean, you don't get to say how someone else is going to protect themselves. That's what they get to do.
Well, and it really comes back down to just basic constitutional. They're not supposed to have a say in any of this, regardless of the fact that, there are times where you need 30 rounds, like done. But even if that wasn't the case, even if that was a hypothetical reality, it's not their business, and they're not supposed to be able to say. So, yeah. But as we see so many times, there's a double standard for them that they get to do something other than what we do, which makes me think of Alec Baldwin, everyone.
Oh, yes.
We should talk about what's going on here. And I genuinely want to give as much grace. We've talked about this a little bit. And I want to give as much room for doubt as possible. I really do. Like, I don't want to just he's anti-gun and I don't like him for it. So I don't want to jump all over, but he's making the claim that he didn't pull the trigger. We've already talked about how many failures there were in this. They had live ammunition on the set, finger off the trigger rule. Like, there's all these things. There's him checking his gun. There's the armorer supposed to have checked the gun. There's multiple failures of gun safety in this. We've already acknowledged that, all that. But now he's making a claim that he did not pull the trigger. Now notice, he did not make the claim that he did not have his finger on the trigger. He made the claim that he did not pull the trigger. And so, I don't know, Pete, you have very much experience with single action firearms. Very much.
Not, I wouldn't say a ton, but I mean, I definitely have fired them.
Yeah.
What he's claiming is that he didn't pull the trigger, that he was told to cock the gun and then decock the gun. And it was when he was decocking the gun, maybe it got away from his thumb and it slammed down.
Yeah.
So it could be true that he didn't pull the trigger.
Well, but let's just be honest. You have to depress the trigger partially to decock the gun on
Not
most
necessarily.
single action revolvers. On many. Now, maybe this is an old or it's modified, but most of the time you do a slight, maybe you don't have it pulled back all the way, whatever, but
maybe.
you generally, I mean, I will tell you, like single action revolvers, generally you have to do a slight trigger pull to depress. And so there's a whole way in which you hold it to the ground, point it away, and you depress it that way. So you're not pointing at anybody when you're doing it, because there is a little bit of danger in it. And so then I'm like, well, technically then, if that's what you're doing, well, technically you depress the trigger, unless it's a modification and it's a different thing. Not depressed all the way, but there's a partial pull that you do to disengage the hammer so that you can. And so I'm like, well, okay. So, and by the way, I can see that kind of accident happening. Like I understand, but that's why there's a protocol for how you do that. You point it away from anybody towards the ground. You're as careful as possible.
To be fair, okay, this is a movie, so it's not about, doing it the right way. Could have been for dramatic effect. Now, you and I mentioned, well, it was for a movie, so isn't there film of this? Mm-hmm. Like, can't we actually see what he did?
Yeah.
Because the cinematographer was filming the thing.
Yeah.
So it should be there, right?
Well, and do we understand how two people got shot?
Did the bullet go through one?
That's what I'm wondering. Like I'm curious. I really don't know. I'm not making any accusation on that. I just don't know. I'm curious as to how that happened. I'm assuming a bullet went through, because it would be really strange to do this twice in a row. But that's what I'm assuming. But then I'm like, how many times do we see a 45 go through? I guess it does. But
depends on what the ammo was. Depends on how small the gal was. I don't know if she was.
I mean, yeah,
a wisp of a gal. I have no idea, right? I mean,
filming, maybe somebody's right behind somebody. Yeah.
Well, that's what I think it was. It was the cinematographer and the director was right behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's what it was. And so he was aiming at the camera, which is what the cinematographer was behind. And that's why she got shot, and didn't know she got shot at first. She was like, something's wrong. And then she sees the blood.
Oh,
and so,
that just breaks my heart, man. Yeah. And I really do come back to, like, there's an accident that happened here. Like, I don't think he had any intention. Like, we need to give some grace, like his tragic accident, but there's just so many things that I'm like, the rules were not being followed. And it sounds like even for what he was doing, it's like, and maybe it was for the movie, but it's like, well, man, think about, like, if you and I were filming something and we were to point a gun at a camera, do you know what we would do? We would say, like, remote record this. So if the worst that could happen is us shoot a camera, like we just wouldn't do that. Like, we just wouldn't.
Well, we would, at very least, we would have manually checked it ourselves, and we would have handed it to someone else right next to us and said, check clear. Like, we wouldn't have even left it up to just us.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can see there's no bullet in there. Hey, check clear. Oh, yeah, it's clear. Yeah. All right, good. That's two of us saying this thing is clear.
Yeah. It's just, it comes back to, and I'm not even in a angry tizzy about it. It's just, you have somebody who doesn't like guns, so they don't learn about guns. And so now they're using guns for their job, and something really bad happens that would have been far, far less likely to happen if they'd had respect for guns. And that's just kind of where I keep coming back to in this thing. And I'm a little frustrated on the whole thing. Like, can you imagine if it was us, like, even in that situation, if with the exact same thing that he's saying happened, I think we would probably issue a different kind of statement. I think we would be like, I was decocking the gun, and this is what happened. We probably wouldn't say we didn't pull the trigger. We would say, I was decocking the gun and the hammer slipped and it's tragic and I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know. Yeah. There's just something about the way it's all happened. I'm like, you're not talking like a person that knows about this, Alec. And it frustrates me.
But this can't be the first movie he's done that had guns in it. I mean, I don't really follow Alec Baldwin, so I have no idea, but I just can't imagine it is.
Yeah.
And then you got The Rock going, I'm not going to allow any real guns on any movie I ever do. First of all, I I'm fine with that because I don't understand why in an industry that's made up on making everything up, everything is fake.
But they use real guns.
But they use real
pretty
guns
much all the time.
And in California, they get to have standard capacity magazines. Of anybody who does not need standard capacity magazines, it's the guys who make everything up. Everything is fake to them.
Yeah.
Why are they allowed to have standard capacity magazines, but I'm not?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense to me either. But that's just us gun podcasters who want to know why it's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so anyway, it seemed like there was something else we were going to talk about today, Pete.
I thought there was. Now I don't remember what it was.
And we're going to talk about the Chinese listening in on us.
Oh yeah. Okay. So here's what I was going to say about that. So I was invited to Genius Network for their big annual event. And what happened was they had a guy come to the event who, like, his job is to report on everything China is doing. And like, he reports to heads of state, private companies, public companies, like, where they want to know, what should we be doing over here? He's like, you don't understand. He goes, if you look at the playbook, they've told us what they're going to do. And they are literally stealing everything from us. He goes, it wasn't enough that, I can't remember which plane he mentioned, but it was some big plane that, our people had spent years, decades probably developing. And now China's got it. Like, they just took the blueprints and, made it. So it's not just loss of intellectual knowledge, but think about all the money that could have brought to the United States who actually developed that if they developed those planes for China. But he goes, look, anything that goes through China, because everything there is state run, everything is, they have access to it all. He goes, they've got it all. He goes, so Zoom especially, he goes, because their security and encryption cloud services were in China. Everything is going through China. China's got all the encryption keys. So they're absolutely sucking all of the data out of, like, our Zoom right now. He goes, so he would not get on a Zoom call with them when they were trying to hire him to come speak to this annual meeting. He's like, no, I'm not doing Zoom. He's like, not going to do it at all, because I know that's all going through China. And he's like, your phones. He goes, they know, like, any phone. He goes, anything that's in China and comes over here, you have to assume they're monitoring it.
Yep.
They've embedded code, whatever. If they're like, so I'm thinking all my Apple products, because they literally ship it to me from China.
Yeah.
He's like, they know when you wake up in the morning, they know the first apps you're getting on, they know when you're going to bed at night, they know it all because they're already in your phone. Like, he threw up the red flags left and right. And I was just like, great. I don't even know how to react from that, because everything I got then is based out of China. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for the, like, okay, so what do we do then? Like,
his point was, you got to innovate out. He's like, it's the entrepreneurs that are going to save us. But then you got to entrepreneur in such a way that you're not running everything through China. And I think he even brought up, he goes, our patent system, you understand, to get a patent, you've got to actually describe your process, describe your product. You got to spell it out. It's basically the blueprint for how to do what it is you're trying to patent. And that's all public record. So they just troll through our patents and then they just go recreate the stuff because it's the blueprint on how to do it. They got it all right there.
And they just don't care.
No. Well, because their goal is, the way they see it, we controlled the world for 2,300 years. We're going to control it again. So it's just a matter of time before we get to control the world again. Like, that's kind of the way that they see it. So that's what their whole party is going towards. And he's like, look, if whoever the head is of the Communist Party right now, he goes, it doesn't even matter if that guy dies. They're just going to put someone else in the place. It doesn't, like, that guy is like almost irrelevant because it's the party as a whole that's controlling everything.
The communists, man.
Yeah.
Well, and this, what communists always just steal. That's what they do. So, like, they shouldn't surprise us that they're stealing our IP. That's what they do. This is all that communists ever do. is steal stuff from other people and then destroy.
And they didn't even come up with the AK. That was Russia.
It's true. Good old Kalashnikov. It's always funny to me how much us gun guys who hate communism, we really just love Kalashnikov. Just like, he's just such a good guy. Like there's this, you've seen the picture of him and Eugene Stoner like together, and they're holding each other's weapons.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Stoner's, maybe it's edited, but it's cool. They're smiling and they're holding up like each other's guns. So like Kalashnikov has an M16 or whatever, and Eugene Stoner is holding up a Kalashnikov. It's cool. It's a cool picture.
All I know is Eugene Stoner, I don't know how he came up with the AR, but it has got to be the best platform you could ever imagine. Like where everything is positioned on that firearm, for a righty at least, it's perfect. It's from dropping the mag to sending the bolt back down. I'm like looking at this thing going, this thing is a work of art.
It is.
Locking the bolt back so you can stick in. I mean, I'm like, dude, how did he think all this stuff up?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think about what would have happened if, that platform was not rolled out first in Vietnam, because it got a bad rap initially because the first run of it is in the worst conditions. And none of the guys who had it had trained under it. I mean, at least not really. Like they were used to something else. So there's all these things going against it, and eventually it overcame those things going against it. But I keep thinking of like if we'd rolled this out in 2 years before, and we'd actually trained those soldiers on it ahead of time, and they had range time and got to work through it, all that kind of stuff. Would have been cool, but already like it has overcome the negativity, and it is an amazing rifle. We all just love them. Yeah. Good old Stoner, man. Good guy. Well, that's all I have, man. I didn't have anything else to mention today. Tell everybody to check out, keep watching Lake Erie Arms, man. We're excited. The big announcement on the new facility. And so hopefully it's going to be a while. Building is going to take some time, but another 18 months or so, we might be indoor skeet shooting while it's snowing outside. So
indoor skeet shooting?
Indoor skeet shooting, brothers.
I don't know how you're going to pull that one off.
No, there's a way. There's actually there's one or two other places in the world that's doing it. And it can be done. They've got like Kevlar padding. There's a whole thing, but it's pretty cool. We're going to have just check it out. We will have 100-yard rifle ranges indoor. Several pistol lanes, and then the indoor skeet shooting. It's going to be kind of cool. I'm excited about it. Cool. Going to have a fun time. And we care about things being indoors here in Ohio because we have like 6 months where it's like, well, I can't go outside because it's snowing and raining and cold and annoying. So we took care of that for you. So you're going to be good time. So check out learms.net. More information coming on that. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.